at the Marguerite Casey Foundation. And I'd like to congratulate the American Muslim Community Foundation on hosting its first annual symposium and all of tonight's honorees. The Marguerite Casey Foundation believes that the engine of power is freedom, and we are committed to fueling it in partnership with organizations like the American Muslim Community Foundation in order to support leaders to shift power by giving them the resources to lead working people and families towards freedom. Our core organizing principle and gauge of success must be creating greater freedom for leaders. Visit caseygrants.org to learn more or follow us on Twitter at caseygrants. Congratulations to tonight's honorees, and thank you for what you do each day to imagine a world where our democracy and economy truly represents the contributions, dreams, and desires of communities that have been excluded from sharing in the resources and benefits of society. People should be more than just represented in our democracy and our economy. Their representation must include the ability to shape it.
All right. Thank you guys so much. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors and also a special note that we still will be running our auction. So make sure that you're going to check out our auction. We appreciate it. Let me give you a shout out hashtag Muslim Philanthropy and at a Muslim AMCF to make a donation, everybody. So I'm shouting out everybody. And also bid on those items. They don't bid on themselves, brothers and sisters. So we have a shout out for all of our sponsors you can see on the screen. Make sure I'll be shouting them out later, inshallah. But you can see some of the people: Bill and Melinda Gates, Bayan, American Muslim Community Foundation. They sponsored themselves. The Marguerite Casey Foundation, Andalus Capital, ISNA, Mgage. I can't see a couple of them. This is when your eyes get bad. I hope you guys don't mind. I got to do this. Ready? All right. Islamic Relief, Sanad Care, Venture Leading Consulting, Philanthropy Together, Hader Hyder Foundation, Islamic Scholarship Fund Guidance, Helping Hand, Muslim Civic Coalition, Zaman, Killing Team Group. All right, my eyes aren't that good, folks. Trust me, whoever donated to AMCF, they're good people. So let's set up our first panel, everybody. And this is very important, very important. Listen, part of this is just interactive. So I don't want people to just sit there at the screen and like listen to folk. I want you to interact. We got a great moderator, Justin Mashof, and we have extremely educated and talented guests. One thing I want to make sure you do is for the poll. We have a poll. If you have a question, if you have an inquiry, if you have a thought, text AMCF poll 1 at 71441. That's AMCF poll 1 at 71441. So let me bring on our first, our moderator, if you will, the guy I'm very excited with, a personal friend of mine, Brother Justin Malshoff. I mean, this guy is a 4-time Emmy-winning filmmaker. Did you dig that? Living in LA, he received his Bachelor of Fine Arts in the Media Arts from University of Arizona in 2008. His documentary, Warring Factions, followed him to Iran, where he met with a group of young Iranian breakdancers for a b-boy battle. Now, you don't think about b-boy, but I'm saying it. Justin, you know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So in his recent documentary, The Honest Struggle, if you haven't supported his film, you need to support his film. Okay, it chronicles the story of an ex-gang leader returning from home, returning from prison, coming back home. He's trying to redefine himself in a world in which he feels no belonging. Sounds like Trump, but it's okay. It's all right. This film was amazing. I actually purchased it, Brother Justin, so I have it at my house. From me to you, thank you for that process, and we're going to turn it over to you, brother.
Thank you, Brother Preacher Mus. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And it's an honor to be asked to host this and lead this discussion. I don't want to take too much time because Brother Osama and Sister Marguerite are are brilliant minds in our community, and they're amazing leaders in their own right. I would like to just state really that this topic of creating a better tomorrow is such a pivotal piece of our faith, and that we see constantly in the Quran that we are implored to seek a better world through prayer and through giving. In many places we see salat always many times paired with zakat. This verse I wanted to reflect on, particularly from Surah Al Imran, ayat 92. You shall not attain righteousness until you give out of which you love. And living here in the modern age, what we love the most, especially in America, is our hard-earned money and our time. So this instruction, this mission of our faith that which hold dear, and something that inspires me on a daily basis, is to remember these instructions, and to remember our historical precedents, which taught us to enable the community in a way that is organized, and in a way that will last, and in a way that is thoughtful. We have examples from the life of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, that he essentially gave swaths of land, of farmland, that would go on to support the mission, the Islamic mission, throughout the generations, detailed through his will, giving plots of farmland and saying that, the people who live on this land shall live off of it, but also the rest of the proceeds should go towards these causes, and listing out in extreme detail where these endowments should be placed. Remembering the legacy of Fatima al-Fihri, who was the founder of the first university in North Africa, Al-Qarawin, which was in 859. An amazing feat that this endowment still, moves forward to this day. We have modern examples from, my father's homeland of Iran, is that, many people leave their legacy, their financial legacy, to the Ostana Quds, which is to the shrine of Imam Ali ibn Musa Reza, who's a descendant of the Prophet, who they themselves have complex systems of transportation companies and flower plants, all that benefit the endowment of the Islamic arts and sciences towards, orphanages and so on, and public services. So comparing that to our modern situation here in America is very different. It's a stark difference. And I wanted to draw that distinction, and hope that we can gain inspiration from the words of our panelists. That, in my experience, the Muslim American community philanthropy is very much reactive. We are often just consistently responding to crisis after crisis after crisis, and rather than having a proactive model of giving. So I wanted to point to our panelists and greet them and welcome them and thank them for coming on. And ask the first question and give them the time, is how do we transition from this crisis-based giving to a model of strategic Muslim philanthropy? And that's for either of you guys. You guys can jump in and take whoever wants it first.
Moderator, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big topic, and something I want to, really recognize that, we have Osama, who's working and doing direct services and relief, and that's so important. Part of what the challenge that we're faced is that a lot of times within our giving, we want to see that immediate impact, right? Like there's the direct relief, right? It's the direct feeding of someone who's hungry right now. And what we have to think about is yes, we need to do that. And there's a whole ecosystem so that we can continue to feed people tomorrow, right? There's the cultivating, the planting, right? You know, like when we understand food systems, right? We know that we have to think about the production of food, the supply, the system of getting food to the people. And so there's a lot of things that we don't see beyond the kind of you know, like, and we're right on Thanksgiving, right, where you have like those Thanksgiving dinners, right, where you see the smile of people when they're going and getting fed. One of our challenges is to think strategically and long term, of thinking about not just how can we feed people who are hungry, right? But how do we get to the root causes? Why are people hungry, right? And then when we get to that root cause analysis and thinking about how can we solve that issue of why people are hungry, and that our giving actually addresses some of those root cause issues while addressing the immediate impact. So we have to think about that multi-pronged approach, and our psychology of giving has to not just be on that immediate gratification of feeling, okay, like, hey, I did this thing and it had this immediate impact, but I've actually helped supply that infrastructure that will have that long duration impact for generations. And so not just I'm gonna give somebody an apple, right? But how do we plant an orchard that can feed people for generations? And that may be right now we're not feeding people, but that we're planting those trees and cultivating them. So in the long term, that people can continually be fed.
And I want to apologize. I thought our bios were done, that Sister Marguerite's bio was done beforehand. So I wanted to introduce her and Brother Osama formally. Is that Marguerite Hill is the co-founder and executive director. I'm sorry, coming from Hollywood, producer, executive director of the Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, a human rights education organization, and co-founding and co-director of the Black Muslim COVID Coalitions. She's also a freelance writer and a published author in How We Fight White Supremacy. And also she earned her bachelor's degree in history from Santa Clara University in 2003. She has a master's in history and Middle East studies and Islamic Africa from Stanford in 2006. Her research includes transformations in Islamic education, colonial surveillance in northern Nigeria, anti-colonial resistance among West Africans in Sudan during the early 20th century, and interethnic relations in Muslim communities and the criminalization of Black Muslims. So a lot of things. And our dear brother Osama, he is the CEO and president of Penny Appeal USA, which is a 501c3 development organization committed to alleviating poverty here in the U.S. and overseas. Since launching in 2016, the organization has grown substantially each year and has raised over $18 million. He serves as board of director in the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. The board was recognized this year by the Center for Nonprofit Advancement with the 2020 Board Leadership Award. As far as his educational background, he holds a BA from Queen Mary University in London and a law degree from the University of Oxford. He is a certified fundraising executive and has a graduate certificate in nonprofit executive management from Georgetown University. So you are a very, very schooled man as well.
You're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you, Justin. And I'm just going to really build off what Margaret said. So assalamu alaikum, everybody. Peace be upon you all. And thank you to AMCF for the invitation. What I like about this question is really it puts the question to the donor. And so the question is, how do we move as donors from crisis giving to more sustainable giving? And so I think Marguerite said it absolutely right, that obviously we have to think of the future. So I want to break this question down and answer it in essentially 3 points in the short time that I have. The first point is really the idea of proactive giving versus reactionary giving. And what we need to do as a community, as individuals, is move away from this reactionary giving that we often see in our community to more proactive giving. And how we do that is by being more strategic as donors, and as philanthropists, we have to be far more strategic in how we give. And how do we move away from often emotional giving based in a certain context, which may be a gala or an event or a advert that we may see on television, to more, again, strategic giving. And actually thinking about giving strategically in the same way that we think often about other aspects of our life. And so whether it's buying a house, whether it's a car, those going to pilgrimage and Hajj, you think about these large projects and you plan for them and you save for them. And we should absolutely be approaching our charitable giving in the same way. So point number one is moving away from reactive, emotional giving to more, I would say, intellectual, intelligent, proactive giving. And the way you do that is, of course, via many different vehicles. And the AMCF, if you're not familiar with it, is, of course, one of those vehicles. There are things like DAFs, DAFs, donor advised funds. You know, there are endowments, of course, that you can support. There are annual funds or general funds to support an organization's operations and overhead. There's a lot of ways that, of course, you can give in a more strategic way. And of course, I'm sure if you just go on the AMCF website, you can read about DAFs, you can read about endowments, and they're just two of a number of vehicles that you can engage. My second point really is, so point one is moving to proactive giving and moving away from emotional reactive giving. Point number two is choosing organizations whose missions you believe in passionately. Choosing organizations strategically whose team members you believe in. And that's really, really important. I think often we give, and this is a blessing that we give whenever asked. And of course, we should continue to say yes to giving. But what we need to be is, I believe, more selective in who we give to. So what are the causes? What are the missions that you are passionate about? Whether it be humanitarian work, whether it be animal rights, civil liberties, the environment, there's, of course, a lot of areas to choose from. And I think the biggest impact we can have as philanthropists or as individuals is to choose a certain number of organizations strategically whose missions we align with and who we want to support. And then, of course, once you believe in the mission, once you believe in the team, you have to trust that they will do what's best to serve that mission. And we just have to let them get on with the work. And so, I guess this is a question for me and for those of you watching this afternoon is, are you strategic about who you give to? Or do you just give to the first person who asks? Do you give to the first email that you receive? Do you give because you're in a gala, for example, you happen to find yourself at an event and you put your hand up? Or are you very selective about which is a humanitarian organization I believe in, which is the climate change organization I believe in, which is the masjid or the mosque that I want to support? And again, thinking about that in a very strategic, proactive way. My third point and final point on this question, Justin, is, look, there will always be moments of crisis, right? Of course, we, Penny Appeal, operate in the humanitarian landscape. And so we respond to emergencies, to humanitarian catastrophes. But there will always be different crises. It might be, for example, COVID-19, right? We know right now we're living for nonprofits in what is, in my years in this sector, the hardest year that we've experienced. In terms of the uncertainty, the impact on resources, the impact on individuals, the increase in demand for services is, of course, very drastic. And so these moments of crisis will come, whether it's a crisis in programs, in the field, in personnel, whether it's a PR disaster. The organizations that are best positioned to handle moments of crisis are those organizations that have the most robust infrastructures. It's those organizations that have good, healthy finances. It's those organizations that have resources, whether it be financial or human resources, that are able to stand up and deal with a crisis in that moment. If an organization is struggling to pay its bills, if an organization is struggling to keep the lights on, when a crisis comes, that's going to end up being the final nail in the coffin. And so the reason I say this is that if we as donors, if we as philanthropists move away from crisis giving to more proactive giving, we then empower, encourage, enable organizations in their own moments of crisis to actually survive and to thrive.
It's beautiful. You guys are both very seasoned nonprofit leaders, and you have a lot of experience. I wanted to ask, what is the greatest challenges that you face in your nonprofit work?
So with the greatest challenge, I mean, we definitely faced a number of challenges as a capacity building organization that aims to provide that root cause analysis. So Muslim Arc, just for some context, we also do funders briefs, so we provide a kind of critical analysis and training to philanthropy, right? And in order to do that is a lot of, it takes a lot of research, it takes a lot of understanding systems, it takes a lot of understanding the communities that are being served, right? And the issues. And so the kind of perennial problem that we have in nonprofits, right, is capacity, right? And that you have a lot of people like they funders, and that includes foundations and individuals. They like to focus on these kind of immediate short-term projects with the focus on long-term benefits, right? Like they want you to talk about like 3-5 year outcomes, but yet the funding is funding maybe like 6 months worth of a part of a program, but very little in the overhead and investing in the people that do that work. And so what ends up happening with what Brother Osama had mentioned is that the nonprofit world, where you have some of the best, the brightest, and the most passionate people, do get burnt out because they are in over their heads. They cannot possibly achieve that mission and those objectives and outcomes with the little bit of resources, because so much of the focus is on pushing out programming and very little in the back end office. So, calls for accountability. Doing an audit can cost, $20,000, and who wants to fund that? That's like the not fun stuff. And so what I found was that how we were able to face some of those challenges have been the forward thinking of donor collaboratives, right? Some of them like Rise Together Fund, where they had the foresight of seeing the importance of Muslim Arc and investing in us. And so when we were brought into their portfolio through strategic planning, so they had partnered with us to develop as an organization. And each year that we got funding, that our funders had supported us in doing capacity building. So for, getting that capacity building really equipped us to rise to the challenge of COVID. And so our donation pools, like many other organizations, had shriveled. And then when we had the uprisings following the murder of George Floyd, was an exponential growth in a demand for our services. And we weren't quite prepared for that. We did not have the full capacity for that. And so we had to really rise to the occasion. It took us months. We're still catching up. I think we're barely catching up to many of the requests that we received. But it was, we've learned a lot of lessons, right, of not being like, what does it look like of not being prepared for how a crisis may occur, and what we'll need to shift. And so we hope to take those lessons, and also in our training is capacity building of providing trainings and like this type of program of educating donors and funders of doing that kind of long-term systems change analysis so that we can invest in strategic ways.
And Osama, I would love to hear your insight on that.
Yeah, so on the issue of challenges, of course, there are the external and then there are the internal and external challenges. On the internal challenges, like Margaret said, think about resources. Number one, very briefly, staff, right? How do you get the best staff? How do you keep them? How do you fund them? How do you ensure that you're getting the best, the brightest? Think about finances, right? What are the costs of raising money? Where to get money from? Really important. Technology, we live in the 21st century, right? Organizations, nonprofits have to move towards that space and have to adopt and use technology in the best way that we can. The issue of recruiting the best and brightest board members committed to your mission. The issue of getting volunteers to stay committed to your cause. And so like Margaret said, you've got program costs, you have communication costs, right? People not only want you to do programs, they want you to communicate the success of that program. They want us as nonprofits to do impact assessments. We have to do needs assessments. All of this, of course, takes money, costs, resources. The other issue outside of resources is infrastructure. So, of course, the back end that Marguerite spoke about. Guess what? We have to handle HR. We have to have office management and rent and operations and utilities and Wi-Fi and phone bills and all the rest of that, which is, you know, business as usual, but that stuff needs time and it needs money and it needs resources. And so therefore, that's really, really important. The third is really competition, right? I think it's a word that we don't like to use in the nonprofit space. The reality, and I think it's actually a healthy reality, is that you as a donor, you as a philanthropist, have choices. Who are the organizations that you believe are best positioned in their subsection or in their sector to actually serve the missions and achieve results? And so with that competition, we as nonprofits have to do better. We have to stand out. We have to sell our vision, our raison d'etre, why we exist. And so, of course, that's another challenge that we have. And these are the internal almost challenges. Externally, like I said, it's competition, but also we have to deal with external realities. So what do I mean by that? Climate change is something we have to deal with. In America, for example, we have the race issue that keeps, of course, on the forefront of our minds. And how do we respond in a proactive, sustainable, serious, genuine way to the issue of race in America? How do we respond to political realities, right? And so forth. Right now, we are living in a moment of, I think, historic insecurity when it comes to the American elections, right? And so there is a range of expectations on us from our donors, from the media, from our supporters to react and respond to external pressures. And of course, we're only able to do that if we are very well positioned to do that. And one point, I know we're running out of time here, but one point I think is really important. In everything we do today, and I think if the viewers walk away, Justin, from one thing this afternoon, it's, can we change the way that we think about nonprofits? While, of course, there are nonprofits like ours that provide services, that are on the front lines providing services, that's important. I think we have to change the way we think about the role and the nature of nonprofits, right? If we see nonprofits simply as service providers, well, then we're never really going to tackle the root issues or the root causes, whether it be climate change, whether it be poverty, whether it be animal rights. We're never going to get to the root causes of those issues. And so we as donors, we as philanthropists need to think about nonprofits as being more than just service providers. If we want to do research, if we want solutions, if we want to do advocacy and lobbying, then we have to start thinking about nonprofits almost as tech companies, as startups, right? We as shareholders, those of us who maybe invest in tech companies, we're happy when our tech companies invest in R&D, for example, research and development. But imagine a nonprofit taking some budget and investing that in research and development, what kind of reaction we would have. And so we need to move away from seeing nonprofits as purely service providers, and we need to see nonprofits as researchers, as those involved in advocacy, those in long-term solution finding. And final thing I'll say, Justin, is governments think in 3, 4, 5-year time spans, right? An administration comes in, has 5 years. If they're lucky, unlike Mr. Trump, if they're lucky, they may have 8 years. But we as nonprofits can actually afford to think 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line. And so I hope everybody takes that message home with them this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Osama. Thank you, Marguerite. Please check out our resources to find out more about our panelists and their work. The Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, Penny USA, my film, The Honest Struggle, you can find on Amazon Prime. The Margaret Casey Foundation, who sponsored this panel, and the American Muslim Community Foundation, of course. So I'm going to throw to my good friend, Preacher Moss. Preacher Moss, take us away.
All right, brother. I will try. I'm trying to follow a lot of information, brother. A lot of information, alhamdulillah. So thank you, all panelists. If you're really listening to what they were talking about, I just want everybody to understand that AMCF is really dedicated to these exact same things. The idea of being able to empower donors to make good decisions, and again, empower nonprofits through their consulting. They have such things as the Donor Advisor Fund. They also have financial, fiscal scholarship, sponsorships as well. They have giving circles. So the idea is to increase the capacity for giving, increase the capacity literally to be able to empower your decision for where you want your money to go, donors, and for nonprofits, to increase your longevity, to